You spend hours crafting the perfect email, only to second guess every word before hitting send. You redo multiple projects multiple times because they're never quite good enough. You avoid trying new things because you might not excel immediately. What started as wanting to do well has become a prison of impossible standards. Perfectionism promises excellence, but delivers anxiety, procrastination, and paralysis. If you've ever felt trapped by your own impossibly high standards, today we're exploring how grace can set you free from being imprisoned by perfectionism. I want you to imagine two artists working on paintings. The first artist approaches their canvas with joy and curiosity. They experiment with colors, try different techniques, and embrace happy accidents that lead to unexpected beauty. When they make what others might call a mistake, they see it as a part of the creative process and find ways to incorporate it into their final piece. They share their work freely, knowing it's not perfect, but finding satisfaction in the expression and growth. The second artist approaches their canvas with fear and tension. They plan every brushstroke in advance, agonize over color choices, and restart whenever something doesn't match their vision exactly. They compare their work constantly to other artists, believing anything less than perfection is failure. They rarely finish pieces because they're never good enough, and they certainly don't share their work because they might be criticized. Both artists care about their craft. Both want to create something meaningful, but one is free to create while the other is imprisoned by their own impossible standards. That is the difference between healthy striving and toxic perfectionism. Healthy striving motivates us to grow, learn, and improve. It celebrates progress and finds satisfaction in effort, even when outcomes aren't perfect. Toxic perfectionism, on the other hand, sets impossible standards, fears failure above all else, and finds no joy in the process because the focus is entirely on the unachievable outcome. Perfectionism affects millions of people, and its impact on mental health can be devastating. Research shows that perfectionist tendencies are linked to higher rates of anxiety, depression, eating disorders, and even suicide. Perfectionists often struggle with procrastination because if you can't do something perfectly, then why start at all? They experience chronic dissatisfaction because no achievement ever feels good enough. They live in constant fear of making mistakes or being judged. The Canadian Psychological Association reports that perfectionism, especially among young adults, has increased significantly over the past 3 decades. Social media culture, with its endless opportunities for comparison and judgment, has intensified perfectionistic tendencies. When everyone else's life looks perfectly curated online, the pressure to present an equally flawless image becomes overwhelming. But here's what's particularly cruel about perfectionism. It promises that if you can just be good enough, smart enough, successful enough, flawless enough, you'll finally feel worthy of love and acceptance. It suggests that perfection is the pathway to security and happiness, but perfectionism is a moving target that never stays hit. No matter what you achieve, there's always something better. There's always something that could be better, something that wasn't quite right, someone who did it more impressively. The perfectionism prison has many cells, each with its own form of suffering. The cell of procrastination, where fear of imperfection keeps you from starting important projects until the last minute, or sometimes never starting at all. The cell of burnout, where you work yourself to exhaustion trying to achieve impossible standards, then feel guilty for needing rest. The cell of people-pleasing, where you twist yourself into whatever shape you think others want, losing touch with your authentic self in the process. the cell of comparison, where you constantly measure yourself against others and always find yourself falling short. The cell of shame, where any mistake or flaw becomes evidence that you're fundamentally flawed or unworthy.
Hello, good to see you today here at the Lenses of Love set. I love to watch Sam's message and learn from him how to see God and His Word through the lenses of love. Perhaps you would like to learn more about other questions of life. For example, why am I here? Is there a God? Why is there so much evil and suffering? And why are there so many different religions, and which one is true? Is the Bible fact or fiction? Who is Jesus of Nazareth? Was he truly God as Christians say he is? Why did Jesus come to earth to die? And how does his death offer us salvation? What happens when I die? Is there really a heaven or a hell? These questions and others we answer on our online Bible study platform at hopestudy.ca. There, you will find answers to these and other crucial life questions. We would love to hear from you. Please email us at hopestudy@hopetv.ca. And remember, there is hope and answers to life's biggest questions in the Word of God.
Perfectionism hijacks your brain's reward system. Instead of feeling good when you accomplish something, your brain immediately focuses on what could have been better or what needs to be perfect next time. This creates a psychological treadmill where you're constantly running but never arriving. The finish line keeps moving because perfectionism isn't really about the work, it's about trying to earn worth, love, and acceptance through flawless performance. But here's what perfectionism gets fundamentally wrong. Your value as a human being has nothing to do with your performance. You don't have to earn your right to exist, to be loved, or to take up space in this world. Perfectionism tries to solve an emotional problem through behavioral solutions, but it can never work because the problem isn't really about what you do, it's about how you see yourself. And the irony is that perfectionism often prevents the very excellence it claims to pursue. When you're afraid of making mistakes, you take fewer risks, you try fewer new things, and you stick to what you already know you can do well. Fear of imperfection actually limits growth, creativity, and achievement. The people who excel in their fields aren't usually perfectionists. They're people who are willing to fail, to learn, and to try again. What if instead of pursuing perfectionism, we pursued what psychologists call healthy striving, which is excellence motivated by growth rather than fear, satisfaction found in effort rather than outcome, and worth that exists independent of performance? 2 Corinthians 12 verse 9 gives us Paul's perspective on weakness and strength. He says, each time, he said, my grace is all you need. My power works best in weakness. So now I'm glad to boast about my weaknesses so that the power of Christ can work through me. This passage comes from a place where Paul is describing what he calls a thorn in my flesh, some kind of ongoing struggle or limitation that he repeatedly asked God to remove. And instead of taking it away, God told Paul that divine grace was sufficient and that God's power actually works best through human weakness. This is the opposite of everything perfectionism teaches. Perfectionism says that strength comes from having no weaknesses, no flaws, no limitations. It suggests that we must hide or overcome our imperfections to be valuable. But Paul discovered something different, that acknowledging our limitations and finding grace within them actually opens up to a different kind of strength, one that doesn't depend on our flawless performance. My grace is all you need. The Greek word here for grace, it means unmerited favor or love that isn't earned. Grace is the antidote for perfectionism because it offers what perfectionism promises but can never deliver: acceptance, worth, and love that don't depend on our performance. Perfectionism operates on a works-based system. If I perform well enough, I'll be worthy. If I avoid mistakes, I'll be acceptable. If I'm better than others, I'll be valuable. But grace operates on a completely different system. You are already worthy. You are already acceptable and already valuable, regardless of your performance. This isn't about lowering standards or accepting mediocrity. It's about changing the foundation of your effort from fear to freedom, from earning worth to expressing worth that already exists. My power works best in weakness. This sentence, this phrase turns our understanding of strength upside down. We typically think of weakness as the absence of strength, something to be hidden or overcome. But Paul suggests that acknowledging our limitations actually creates space for a different kind of power to work through us. When we admit that we don't have to be perfect, we stop wasting energy trying to maintain an impossible image. When we acknowledge our limitations, we become more willing to ask for help, collaborate with others, and rely on resources beyond ourselves. When we embrace our humanity instead of trying to transcend it, we often become more effective, not less. So now I am glad to boast about my weaknesses. This is perhaps the most radical statement in this whole passage. Paul isn't just accepting his weaknesses, he's celebrating them. He's found joy in the very things that perfectionism would demand he hide or overcome. This doesn't mean becoming proud of character flaws or avoiding growth. It means recognizing that our limitations, our struggles, and our imperfections are part of what makes us human, and that trying to eliminate them entirely is both impossible and unnecessary. What would it look like to apply Paul's insight to our perfectionistic tendencies? First, it would mean redefining failure. In perfectionist thinking, any mistake or limitation is evidence of personal failure and unworthiness. But from Paul's perspective, struggles and limitations are simply part of the human experience, opportunities to experience grace rather than evidence of inadequacy. Second, it would mean finding motivation in growth rather than fear. Instead of working hard because we're afraid of not being good enough, we could work hard because we enjoy learning, creating, and contributing. The energy behind the effort changes from desperate striving to joyful expression. Third, it would mean measuring success differently. Instead of only counting perfect outcomes, we could celebrate effort, learning, courage, and progress. Instead of comparing ourselves to others or to impossible standards, we can measure our current selves against who we were yesterday, last month, or last year. A young adult shared with me how this shift changed his work experience. He said, I used to redo presentations 4 or 5 times because I was terrified of making mistakes. I'd lose sleep worrying about every detail. When I finally started approaching work as an opportunity to contribute my best effort rather than prove my worth, everything changed. I still work hard, but now I enjoy it more. I learn from feedback instead of being devastated by it. And ironically, my work has gotten better because I'm more creative when I'm not paralyzed by fear. This transformation isn't instant or easy, especially for those who use perfectionism as a coping mechanism for years. Breaking free from perfectionism often requires addressing the underlying beliefs and fears that drive it. Many perfectionists grew up in environments where love and acceptance felt conditional on performance. They learned early that mistakes led to criticism, disappointment, or withdrawal of affection. Perfectionism became a survival strategy, a way to avoid the pain of rejection or disapproval. Healing from perfectionism often involves grieving the childhood experiences that made perfectionism feel necessary, challenging internalized beliefs about worth and acceptance, and gradually building new experiences of unconditional love and acceptance. Perfectionism is about never making mistakes and always being better than others. Excellence celebrates growth and effort. Perfectionism only finds value in flawless outcomes. The journey from perfectionism to healthy striving often involves several key shifts in thinking and behavior. First, learning to see mistakes as information rather than evidence of failure. Every error contains valuable data about what works, what doesn't, and what to try next. Scientists don't see failed experiments as personal failures. They see them as essential steps toward discovery. The same perspective can transform how we approach any area of our lives. Second, developing what psychologists call self-compassion, treating yourself with the same kindness you'd show a good friend who was struggling. You see, perfectionists often have incredibly harsh inner critics that would be considered abusive if they spoke to others the way they speak to themselves. Learning to offer yourself gentle encouragement instead of brutal criticism doesn't lower your standards. It actually helps you perform better because you're not wasting energy on self-attack. Third, practicing what researchers call good enough decision making. For many decisions, 80% perfect is actually perfect enough. The time and energy spent pursuing the extra 20% of perfection often isn't worth the cost, especially when that energy could be directed toward other valuable activities or relationships. Learning to identify which situations truly require your absolute best effort and which ones just need your good effort is a crucial life skill. Fourth, building what psychologists call failure resistance, the ability to bounce back from setbacks without catastrophizing or generalizing. This involves learning to see individual failures as specific events rather than evidence of global inadequacy. One failed test doesn't make you stupid. One relationship ending doesn't make you unlovable. One work mistake doesn't make you incompetent. Developing this kind of perspective takes practice, but dramatically reduces the fear that drives perfectionism. The spiritual dimension of overcoming perfectionism is really important because perfectionism often reflects a distorted relationship with God. You see, many perfectionists unconsciously believe that they need to earn God's love through flawless behavior, spiritual performance, or moral perfection. But the gospel message is fundamentally anti-perfectionist. It declares that we are loved and accepted not because of our perfect performance, but despite our imperfect performance. Grace means that our relationship with God is secure regardless of our mistakes, failures, or limitations. This doesn't promote carelessness or moral relativism. It simply recognizes that our worth and acceptance aren't at stake in our daily performance. We can strive for excellence as an expression of gratitude and love rather than as a desperate attempt to earn acceptance. Many people find that as they internalize grace, really believing that they're loved unconditionally, they actually become more motivated to grow and improve, not less. When you're not afraid of making mistakes, you're more willing to take risks that lead you to growth. When you know your worth isn't at stake, you can receive feedback without defensiveness. When you understand that you're already accepted, you can pursue excellence for the joy of it rather than the fear of rejection. Understanding the roots of perfectionism can also be crucial for recovery. For many people, perfectionism begins in childhood as a response to inconsistent love or approval. Children who receive praise primarily for achievements rather than for who they are often learn that their worth is performance dependent. They develop what psychologists call conditional self-regard, feeling good about themselves only when they're succeeding according to external standards. Others develop perfectionism as a response to chaos or trauma. When life feels unpredictable or dangerous, controlling every detail within your power can feel like a survival strategy. Perfectionism, it becomes a way of creating safety in an unsafe world, even though it ultimately creates more anxiety than it prevents. Some perfectionists come from families where mistakes were met with harsh criticism, punishment, or emotional withdrawal. They learned early that errors had serious consequences, so avoiding them became a primary life strategy. The child's brain concluded that perfect performance equals safety and love, while mistakes equal danger and rejection. And religious environments like church can sometimes inadvertently foster perfectionism by emphasizing moral performance, spiritual disciplines, or behavior modification without adequate emphasis on grace and unconditional love. When spiritual worth feels tied to perfect adherence to religious practices or moral standards, faith becomes another arena for perfectionist anxiety rather than a source of peace and acceptance. Perfectionism also shows up differently in different areas of life. Some people are academic perfectionists who can't tolerate getting anything less than perfect grades. I think I can resonate with that pretty well. Others are social perfectionists who exhaust themselves trying to be liked by everyone. Some are moral perfectionists who beat themselves up over every minor ethical lapse. Others are appearance perfectionists who are trying to spend hours trying to achieve an impossible physical standard. And what's particularly insidious about perfectionism is how it masquerades as a virtue in our achievement-oriented culture. We praise people for their high standards and attention to detail without recognizing when these traits have crossed the line into mental health problems. Perfectionism gets celebrated as dedication and excellence when it's actually often anxiety and fear in disguise. And the workplace can be especially challenging for perfectionists because many professional environments seem to reward perfectionist behaviors, at least on the surface. That employee who stays late redoing presentations, who never makes mistakes, who appears to have everything under control often gets positive recognition. But this external success often comes at an enormous personal cost: burnout, anxiety, strained relationships, and the loss of creativity and innovation. Social media has dramatically amplified perfectionist tendencies by creating new platforms for comparison and judgment. The pressure to maintain a perfect online image, the right photos, the clever captions, the inviolable lifestyle. It extends perfectionism into areas of life that previous generations could keep private. Now even casual social interactions feel like performance opportunities where mistakes might be publicly visible and permanently recorded. Recovery from perfectionism often requires grieving what feels like a loss of identity. Many perfectionists have built their entire sense of self around being the person who doesn't make mistakes, or the one who always has it all together. Choosing to embrace imperfection can feel like losing the very thing that makes them feel special or valuable. This grief is real and valid, but on the other side of it lies the discovery of a much more authentic and sustainable way of being. We'll be right back.
Every day, Hope Channel Canada is transforming lives with health, love, and salvation. Together, we are creating a ripple effect that spreads hope across the nation. Now we invite you to become an agent of hope in Canada. Whether it's through prayer, volunteering, or your financial support, your involvement creates a larger wave of change. Like puzzle pieces coming together, every small act contributes to a bigger picture of hope. So visit agentsofhope.ca or call 1-855-4-HOPE-TV to join the movement. Thank you for sharing hope with us.
Perfectionism promises you control, but it delivers chaos. It offers you worth, but it steals your joy. It suggests that if you just try hard enough, you can avoid all criticism, failure, and disappointment. But perfectionism is a false god that demands everything but gives nothing in return. The freedom Paul describes in 2 Corinthians 12 verse 9 isn't the freedom to be careless or mediocre. It's the freedom to be human, to make mistakes without losing your worth, to have limitations without shame, to fail without being a failure. Breaking free from perfectionism is often a gradual process that requires patience with yourself, which can be challenging for recovering perfectionists. Here are a couple ways to just take those steps towards freedom. Start small. Choose one area of your life where you can practice good enough instead of perfect. Maybe it's allowing yourself to send emails without triple checking every word, or submitting work when it's solid rather than flawless. Develop a growth mindset about your mistakes. When you make one, practice saying or asking, what can I learn from this, instead of, how could I be so stupid? Reframe mistakes as tuition payments for your education rather than evidence of your inadequacy. Set realistic deadlines and stick to them. Perfectionists often miss deadlines because they keep trying to make things better. Practice submitting work when it's due rather than when it's perfect. Celebrate effort and progress, not just outcomes. Notice when you try something new, take a risk, or handle feedback well. These process victories are often more important than perfect results. Practice self-compassion when you fall short. Talk to yourself the way you talk to a friend who's struggling. Harsh self-criticism doesn't motivate better performance. It usually just creates anxiety and shame that make improvement all the more harder. Seek feedback regularly rather than avoiding it. Perfectionists often delay getting input because they want to present something flawless, but early feedback usually improves final outcomes and reduces the pressure to get everything right on your own. If perfectionism has become severely limiting, causing significant anxiety, depression, or interfering with your ability to function, please consider get professional help. Therapists who specialize in perfectionism can help you identify the underlying beliefs and fears that drive it and develop healthier ways of approaching challenges and setbacks. In Canada, this kind of support is often available through employee assistance programs or provincial health services or private practitioners. The Canadian Psychological Association can help you find qualified professionals in your area. Remember that pursuing excellence and embracing imperfection aren't opposites, they're partners. When you are not afraid of making mistakes, you're more likely to take risks that lead to breakthrough achievements. When you're not paralyzed by the need to be perfect, you can iterate, improve, and grow in ways that perfectionism actually prevents. As you look at your own perfectionistic tendencies through these lenses of love, seeing them not as character strengths, but as coping mechanisms that have outlived their usefulness, you might discover something surprising. You're more creative, productive, and joyful when you're not trying to be perfect. You might find that your relationships deepen when people see your authentic self rather than your polished performance. You might discover that you learn faster when you're not afraid of making mistakes. You might realize that your best work comes not from flawless execution, but from genuine expression of your unique gifts and perspectives. And perhaps most importantly, you might experience what Paul discovered, that acknowledging your limitations doesn't make you weak, it makes you real. And being real with all your imperfections and struggles opens you up to a grace that perfectionism can never provide and a strength that performance can never generate. In a world that constantly tells you that you need to be better, faster, stronger, more successful, choosing to embrace your beautiful, imperfect humanity becomes a radical act of self-love and spiritual wisdom. It's the beginning of freedom from the perfectionism prison and the start of a life lived in the grace that says that you are enough exactly as you are right now.